In the heart of the African savanna, beneath the vast, open skies and amidst the golden grasses that stretched as far as the eye could see, there lived a mother and her young calf. Moyo, a wise and caring African elephant, was a figure of strength and grace. She had seen many seasons pass, and in her many years, she had learned the ways of survival in the wild. Her deep, dark eyes, full of experience, were always observing the movements of her herd, the rhythm of nature, and the quiet shifts in the air. She was a mother who carried the weight of wisdom with grace, always guiding and nurturing her calf. Kibo, her young son, was a curious and energetic elephant, eager to learn about the world around him. His large ears flopped slightly as he ran playfully behind his mother, his trunk swaying in the air, always reaching out to explore new things. Though Kibo was still a calf, his intelligence shone brightly. He was quick to pick up new skills and always had questions that seemed to burst forth with the boundless enthusiasm of youth. Moyo, ever patient, was the perfect guide, teaching Kibo the fundamental lessons that would shape him into a strong, capable elephant. The savanna was their home, a sprawling land filled with life, rich with the scent of fresh grass, the hum of insects, and the occasional sound of distant predators. Here, in the wild, there was both beauty and danger, and Moyo made sure to teach Kibo the delicate balance between respecting the land and surviving within it. She knew that the savanna was not a place where one could afford to be careless. It was a place where life and death danced together, constantly intertwined. Moyo and Kibo spent their days moving through the savanna, following the herd and visiting watering holes, grazing on the lush grasses that covered the plains. The heat of the sun would often beat down upon them, but they were never alone. The elephant herd, a tight-knit family unit, always stood by each other, and Moyo made sure to reinforce the importance of unity and togetherness. As Kibo's mother, Moyo took it upon herself to teach him the essential skills he would need to thrive in the wilderness. It was not just about survival, though that was certainly an important aspect of life in the wild. It was about understanding the land, the animals, and the unspoken rules of nature. Every day, she would guide Kibo through the vastness of the savanna, explaining how to find water by following the scent of damp earth, how to forage for the best grasses, and how to navigate through the complex network of the herd. Kibo was a quick learner, and it wasn't long before he began to show signs of his mother's intelligence. He could recognize the different sounds of the savanna, each animal's call, the wind rustling through the trees, the crunch of dry grass underfoot. His trunk, though still young and a little awkward, had already begun to grow stronger, and he was learning to use it to grasp branches, pull up grasses, and even playfully splash water from the river. Kibo's curiosity was endless, and he was constantly asking Moyo about the world around him. "Mama," Kibo would ask, his large ears twitching, "how do the lions know where to find us? And how do they stay so quiet when they hunt?" Moyo would pause, her thoughtful eyes softening as she turned to face her son. She had answered this question before, but Kibo's curiosity knew no bounds, and every time, She answered with the same patient wisdom. The lions are very clever, my son. They use the wind to help them. Just like we do. The wind tells them where we've been. And it helps them stay close without us noticing. But we, too, are wise. We listen. And we watch. We stay together as a family. And we know when danger is near. Kibo would nod thoughtfully, absorbing every word. His mind was always racing. And his questions often made Moyo smile. He was growing so quickly. And Moyo was proud to see the intelligent young calf he was becoming. Every day, Kibo would follow his mother as she led the herd through the ever-changing landscape of the savannah. Together, they walked past the tall grasses and through the dusty trails that led to the distant mountains. They grazed on the sweet, tall grasses that lined the riverbanks. And when the heat of the sun became too much, they would rest in the cool shade of a wide acacia tree. Moyo would always remind Kibo to stay close, to never wander too far. The dangers of the savannah were ever present, and she knew that even a young, curious calf like Kibo needed to learn the importance of caution. One day, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the savannah, Moyo and Kibo stood at the edge of a watering hole. The air was thick with the scent of earth and fresh water. And the herd was gathered nearby, drinking and splashing in the cool liquid. Kibo, always eager to explore, stepped forward, watching the ripples in the water as the herd moved around him. "Mama," he asked, his trunk dipping into the water. "How do we know when it's time to move on? How do we know when we've stayed too long?" Moyo stood beside him, her massive body casting a protective shadow over her son. She placed a gentle trunk on his back and looked out over the watering hole. "We move when the time is right. Kibo, the land tells us. When we've drunk enough, and the sun begins to dip, we know it's time to go. We never stay too long in one place. The land must be respected. And we must always listen." Kibo looked at his mother. His deep brown eyes filled with wonder and understanding. He had learned to listen to the land, to the wind, and to the sounds of the animals. He had learned to follow the lead of his mother, who always knew what to do, always knew where to go. Moyo was the heart of their little family, and Kibo knew that she was his guide, his protector, and his teacher. He trusted her completely. As the days passed, Kibo began to grow stronger and more independent. His body grew tall, and his trunk, now much more coordinated, was becoming a powerful tool. He could pick up objects, shake trees to reach the highest fruits, and even help the older elephants in the herd with tasks. But, despite his growing abilities, he still looked to Moyo for guidance. His bond with her was unbreakable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of red and purple, Kibo found himself standing at the edge of the savannah once more. The sounds of the herd surrounded him, the deep trumpeting of elephants, the soft murmur of water lapping against the riverbank, and the distant calls of other animals. He looked up at the sky, wondering what lay beyond the horizon. The world seemed so vast, so full of mystery. "Mama," Kibo asked, his voice filled with curiosity, "what's out there, beyond the savannah?" Where do we go when we leave here? Moyo, who had been grazing nearby, paused and turned her head toward her son. Her gaze softened, and she approached him slowly, her large form moving with the grace of someone who had walked these lands for many years. She gently placed her trunk on Kibo's back, looking into his eyes with warmth and love. "The world is vast, my son," Moyo said, her voice gentle but firm. "There is much beyond this savanna, many lands to explore, many things to learn. But the most important thing to remember is that you are never truly alone. You will always carry the lessons you've learned here with you, in your heart, and as long as you stay true to your family, to the herd, you will always find your way." Kibo looked up at his mother, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. He understood. He had learned that the savanna, with its beauty and danger, was a place where life thrived, where every creature had a role to play. And as long as he had Moyo by his side, he knew he would be able to navigate the world, to find his place in it, and to respect the land that had given him so much. "Thank you, Mama," Kibo said softly, his eyes shining with newfound understanding. "I'll always stay close to the herd, just like you taught me." Moyo smiled and nudged him gently with her trunk. "And I will always be here for you, Kibo. Remember, the herd is family, and family is everything." And so, as the sun sank lower and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Kibo and Moyo stood side by side, together in the vast savanna, bound by a love that was as endless as the horizon itself. It was a peaceful afternoon in the heart of the savanna, the sun casting a warm golden hue across the landscape. The air was thick with the earthy scent of the plains, and the rustling of leaves in the trees created a gentle, soothing rhythm. Moyo and Kibo, like many elephants, had found refuge under the shade of a large baobab tree. The heat of the midday sun was relentless, and they had decided to rest, enjoying a brief moment of calm amidst the ever-changing environment of the savanna. Kibo, ever curious and full of energy, had spent the morning exploring the area around them. He had trailed behind the herd, observing the behavior of other animals and practicing his growing skills with his trunk. He had already learned so much from his mother, and as his confidence grew, so did his desire to explore the world beyond the confines of the usual resting spots. But now, as the heat of the day took over, Kibo lay beside Moyo, his head resting against her massive side, watching the occasional bird flutter by, his thoughts drifting lazily in the warmth of the moment. Moyo, too, was relaxed, her large ears flapped gently to ward off the heat, and her eyes were half closed as she stood still, enjoying the coolness of the tree's shade. The world around them seemed peaceful, a typical day on the savanna where the rhythm of nature was unbroken. But that calm, serene atmosphere was about to be shattered by an unexpected turn of events. Without warning, Moyo's body tensed, her head jerked up as if something had startled her, but there was no sound, nothing that Kibo could see. He noticed that her breathing, normally deep and slow, had become shallow, ragged even. She shifted her weight, trying to rise to her feet, but her legs trembled, and she sank back down onto the ground with a heavy sigh. "Mama?" Kibo asked, his voice filled with concern, his large brown eyes widening. He looked at his mother, confusion and worry creeping into his chest. He had never seen her behave like this before. Moyo let out a weak grunt, and Kibo could see that she was struggling. Her normally strong, sturdy frame seemed to be wilting before his very eyes. Her once graceful movements were now slow and awkward, and she looked at him with eyes that were clouded with confusion. Not the clarity and confidence he was used to. It was as though she was unable to understand what was happening to her. As though her own body was betraying her. "Mama, what's wrong?" Kibo asked again, now feeling a sense of panic growing inside him. He knew something wasn't right, and his heart began to race in fear. Moyo had always been his protector, the one who had taught him everything he knew about survival in the wild. Now, it was Kibo's turn to protect her, but he had no idea what was wrong or how to help her. Moyo let out another weak grunt, her trunk twitching slightly as she tried to lift herself once more. But her strength had left her. She collapsed back onto the ground with a soft thud, her massive body shaking with exhaustion. Kibo, his small form now filled with worry, stood up and paced around her, his mind racing. He had never seen his mother so weak, so vulnerable. He had always believed that nothing could defeat Moyo. She was the strongest creature he knew, the protector of their herd. The wise matriarch who had guided him every step of the way. "Mama," Kibo said, his voice cracking with fear. "Please, get up. You have to get up." But Moyo didn't respond. Her breathing was becoming more labored, and she seemed unable to move, her body heavy and weak beneath her. Her eyes fluttered, and Kibo could see that she was struggling to stay conscious. The sight of his mother, his pillar of strength, reduced to this state was almost too much for Kibo to bear. Kibo's mind raced. He knew that they could not afford to stay here, under the baobab tree, unprotected. The savannah was full of dangers. And although Moyo was usually the one who kept them safe, now she was vulnerable. If something were to happen to her, Kibo knew that their survival would be at risk. The young calf's mind flashed with memories of everything Moyo had taught him about the wild. The importance of sticking together, of staying close to the herd. The dangers of predators, the need to stay vigilant, and the critical importance of finding water. But none of those lessons had prepared him for this moment. Kibo was still just a calf, still growing and learning, but now he had no choice but to act. "Mama, please," Kibo said, his voice desperate. "We have to go. We need to find help." Moyo let out another low, exhausted sound, and Kibo could see that she was fighting to stay awake. Her head drooped, and Kibo could see her strength slowly ebbing away. He knew that if he didn't do something, they would both be in danger. Kibo's mind raced as he tried to figure out what he could do. The herd wasn't far. He had to go and find them. Or at least find someone who could help. But Kibo was still so small, and his mother's condition was worsening rapidly. He could not risk leaving her alone for too long. And yet, he knew he couldn't carry her. He couldn't even move her. He had to find a way to get help, and quickly. His trunk trembled as he turned toward the herd, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the distant shapes of other elephants moving on the horizon, grazing lazily in the distance. Kibo's small body felt like it was shaking with the weight of responsibility. But he knew what he had to do. Kibo walked a few steps away from his mother, turning his head to check on her. He knew he had to move quickly, but he also couldn't bear to leave her side for long. His eyes darted toward the herd, then back to Moyo. The herd would have to be the answer. They could help her. But how could he reach them in time? He hesitated for only a moment, his heart racing in fear. He had to do it. He had to leave her for a moment to get help. With one last glance toward Moyo, Kibo turned and ran as fast as his legs could carry him toward the distant herd. His heart pounded in his chest, and his breathing was labored as he pushed himself to go faster, his trunk trailing behind him. He knew that the longer he took, the more dangerous the situation would become. As he ran, his mind raced with thoughts of his mother, thoughts of the wisdom she had given him, the strength she had instilled in him. He could feel the weight of her love, of her guidance. In every step he took, she had always protected him, always been the one to lead him and show him the way. Now, it was his turn to save her. When he finally reached the herd, his voice was filled with desperation as he called out to them. The matriarch, a large, imposing elephant, turned her head to Kibo, her wise eyes narrowing with concern. "It's Mama," Kibo said, breathless. "She's not well. She's too weak to stand. I don't know what's wrong. Please, we have to help her." Without a moment's hesitation, the herd's matriarch called for the others to follow. The elephants moved quickly, their heavy feet pounding the earth as they charged toward the baobab tree. Kibo's heart soared with hope as he turned to lead them back to his mother. The herd was coming. Help was on its way. By the time they reached Moyo, the herd had gathered around her, their large bodies forming a protective circle. Moyo was still lying on the ground, but her breathing had slowed, and Kibo could see that she was barely conscious. The matriarch approached her, carefully extending her trunk to check Moyo's condition. Kibo stood at the edge of the circle, his eyes wide with fear, watching as the other elephants worked together to help Moyo. He felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, relief that they were here, but still worried about his mother's condition. The matriarch gently moved Moyo's trunk and softly called to her. Slowly, Moyo's eyes fluttered open, and she lifted her head slightly, her body still weak but alive. She looked at Kibo with recognition, a faint, grateful smile forming on her face. "I'm here, Mama," Kibo said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "You're not alone." And with the help of the herd, Moyo was lifted to her feet, her strength slowly returning. Though she was weak, she was not beyond hope. The herd had come together, as they always did, to care for one another. Kibo knew that as long as they stuck together, they would survive. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the herd surrounded Moyo, their strength and support forming a protective barrier. Kibo stood close by, his heart still racing but filled with hope, knowing that his mother was not alone, and neither was he. The savannah was unusually quiet. the kind of silence that lingered after the heavy heat of midday had passed. The breeze that moved through the tall grasses carried with it the scent of earth and leaves. But even the typical sounds of distant birds, the rustling of leaves, and the occasional trumpeting of elephants had ceased for a moment. The world seemed to hold its breath. Kibo stood by his mother, Moyo, feeling a gnawing unease in his chest. His mind raced, 1,000 thoughts flashing by, each more urgent than the last. The herd had come to help. But despite their best efforts, Moyo was still too weak to stand on her own. Her breathing, though steady, was labored, and Kibo could see that her body was still fragile. He felt helpless. He had never experienced anything like this before. The wisdom of the savannah, passed down to him through his mother, seemed insufficient in this moment. What could he do to save her? He paced back and forth, his young legs carrying him restlessly across the dry ground. His trunk swung in the air as he considered the many lessons Moyo had taught him: how to find water by sensing the dampness in the earth, how to forage for food, how to move with the herd, and the importance of unity. But none of these teachings seemed to provide an immediate solution to the problem that now faced them. Then, as he thought back to the many times he had heard the thunderous calls of the larger elephants in the herd, those deep, resonant trumpets that carried across the vastness of the savannah, an idea began to form in Kibo's mind. Elephants communicated in many ways, through their body language, their scent, and most famously, their calls. Kibo had heard the older elephants trumpet across the savannah when they were calling to one another, sending messages through the air over long distances. The calls were powerful, deep, and unmistakable, and they could be heard by other herds miles away. He had never tried it himself, but he had heard the calls often enough to recognize their potency. Could he use his own trumpet to call for help? Kibo's trunk twitched as he thought about the idea. He had always tried to mimic the sounds of the herd, experimenting with different tones and rhythms. But he had never used his voice to call for help. What if it worked? What if someone, anyone, could hear him and come to their aid? His mind raced with the possibilities. He looked back at Moyo, who was still lying on the ground, her body weak but her eyes filled with a faint glimmer of recognition as she watched him. She could see the worry in his gaze, but she could also see the determination. Kibo had always been clever, quick to learn, and now, in the face of adversity, he was trying to find a solution. "Please, Mama," Kibo whispered to himself. "I have to try." With newfound resolve, Kibo straightened his body, lifted his trunk high into the air, and focused all of his energy on the one thing that had never failed to capture the attention of those around him: his call. He had heard it before, the deep, powerful sound that echoed across the savannah, a sound so loud and filled with authority that it could summon other elephants from miles away. Now it was his turn to make that sound. The young elephant took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air, and then he pushed the air through his trunk, focusing all of his might into producing the loudest, most resonant trumpet he could muster. The sound that emerged from Kibo's trunk was nothing like he had ever produced before. It was deep, strong, and carried across the savanna like a wave crashing against the shore. It was a sound filled with urgency and hope, a sound that reverberated through the air, echoing over the plains. Kibo's heart pounded in his chest as the call rang out, louder than anything he had ever done before. The call of an elephant could be heard over great distances, and Kibo had just sent out a signal that he hoped would carry far enough to reach someone who could help. The moment the sound left his body, Kibo stood frozen, his ears perked, listening intently for any response. The wind shifted, carrying the sound away from him, and for a long, tense moment, there was nothing but the silence of the savanna. His hope, which had risen with the call, began to falter. Was anyone out there? Could his call have been heard? He turned back to his mother, still lying weakly beneath the baobab tree. Her eyes were now half closed, her breath shallow but steady. Kibo could feel the weight of the moment pressing against him. Time was slipping away, and he needed to act quickly. Suddenly, he heard a sound, distant, but unmistakable. The ground trembled faintly beneath his feet, and the sound of large feet thumping against the earth began to grow louder. His heart leapt. The call had been heard. In the distance, a group of elephants appeared over the rise, moving quickly toward him. The leader of the group, an older bull elephant with a grand, sweeping tusk, trumpeted back in response. Kibo's eyes widened in disbelief and joy. His call had been answered. Help was on the way. The herd moved swiftly, their large bodies moving with impressive coordination as they approached the clearing where Moyo lay. Kibo's legs carried him back to his mother's side, his heart racing with both relief and excitement. The herd was here, and Moyo's strength would be restored. He knew that this was the power of unity, of the herd coming together to protect one of its own. As the other elephants gathered around Moyo, the matriarch and several of the older bulls immediately began assessing her condition. They extended their trunks to touch her, checking for signs of weakness and offering comfort. Kibo stepped back, his small body trembling with both excitement and relief. He watched as the herd's experience and strength began to work in tandem. The matriarch was already using her trunk to provide Moyo with the support she needed, guiding her to a sitting position with the utmost care. Kibo stood off to the side, his mind still processing the event. He had called out for help, and the herd had come. The savanna, vast and often unforgiving, could be harsh and indifferent. But in moments like this, it was clear that the strength of the herd could overcome even the most overwhelming challenges. Moyo's eyes fluttered open, and she let out a soft grunt as the herd's support helped her to her feet. She was still weak, but the presence of the other elephants provided her with the comfort and strength she needed to rise. Kibo moved closer to her, his heart swelling with relief. "Mama, you're okay?" he exclaimed, his voice filled with hope. Moyo's tired eyes softened as she looked down at him. A small, affectionate smile appeared on her face. "You did it, Kibo. You called for help. You're growing so strong, my son." Kibo felt a rush of pride as he looked up at his mother. He had done something he had never thought possible. He had used his voice to call for help. And it had worked. He had saved her. At least for now. The herd encircled them, offering their support and their protection, as they always did for each other. Kibo realized that he had just learned one of the most important lessons in the wild. The strength of the herd lies in its unity. Every member of the herd, no matter how small, had a part to play. Kibo, with his clever idea and his call, had contributed to that unity. As the herd slowly began to move on, Moyo regained more of her strength with each step, and Kibo remained by her side. He had called for help, and now, together with the herd, they would continue their journey. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light across the savanna, and Kibo could hear the distant trumpeting of the elephants as they moved through the grasses. In that moment, Kibo knew that no matter the challenges ahead, he would always have the support of his family. The herd would always be there for him, and he would always be there for them. And with that knowledge, he stepped forward, his trunk high in the air, ready for whatever lay ahead. Kibo's heart pounded with anticipation as he stood by his mother, watching her struggle to stay awake. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him. But there was a flicker of hope in his chest. He had done something. He had called for help. And now all he could do was wait and pray that someone would hear him. The savanna stretched endlessly around them, and the hot sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long, thin shadows across the dry earth. Moyo's breathing was shallow, and her large, wise eyes, usually so full of strength and confidence, were now clouded with exhaustion. Kibo could feel his pulse racing in his ears as he kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for any sign of help. And then, just as his hope began to waver, he heard it, a deep, resonant trumpeting sound, unmistakable in its power and purpose. It was distant at first, barely audible, but as the wind shifted, it became clearer. The call of the elephants, strong and commanding, echoed across the plains. It wasn't just one call. It was a series of trumpets, louder now, more urgent, as if they were answering Kibo's plea for help. Kibo's eyes widened, his ears perked up, and his heart soared. The sound was unmistakable. It was a response. Someone had heard him. The herd was coming. A few moments later, a massive shape appeared over the rise. Kibo could make out the dark, imposing figure of a large bull elephant. Leading the charge, the herd followed close behind, moving swiftly with purpose. Kibo's pulse quickened with excitement and relief. His call had worked. Help was on its way. As the herd drew closer, Kibo could see the matriarch, the wise, old elephant that led the group, moving with incredible speed and grace. The herd was large, each elephant moving in synchronized rhythm, their massive bodies creating a ripple across the landscape. Kibo recognized the lead bull, the one who had been at the front. As below, a respected elder in the elephant community. Below had seen many seasons, and his wisdom was legendary. He had always been a figure of strength and authority, and Kibo had heard his powerful calls many times before. When the herd arrived, they wasted no time. The older elephants, with their years of experience, immediately assessed the situation. They approached Moyo. their trunks reaching out with the careful precision of animals who understood the delicate nature of the savanna. The urgency in the air was palpable, but so was the calm focus that came from experience. Below, leading the herd, stepped forward, his large body imposing and full of command. He looked down at Moyo with eyes filled with concern and recognition. His voice, deep and rich with the weight of his years, broke the silence. "Bring her up," he ordered, his tone firm but calm. "Gently. Now, we must move her before the sun sets." At his command, the elephants of the herd sprang into action. Several of the larger females, led by the matriarch, moved in to support Moyo. With surprising care and precision, they used their trunks to lift her, steadying her massive form with the gentleness that only elephants could muster. Kibo watched in awe as the herd worked together, their strength and unity on full display. Moyo's body was heavy, but the herd worked together as one, their trunks coiling around her and lifting her with such tenderness that it almost seemed as if she were being cradled. Kibo couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him as he watched Moyo slowly rise to her feet. Her legs unsteady but strong enough to stand with the support of the herd. Below stood by, overseeing the process, his wise eyes never leaving Moyo. He made a few subtle gestures, and the herd responded immediately, adjusting their positions to ensure that Moyo was steady and supported. Kibo could see the immense strength of the elephants, both in their physical power and in their ability to work together in a time of crisis. As the herd continued to assist Moyo, Kibo stood beside them, his trunk trembling with both excitement and relief. He had called for help, and now it had arrived. He had been scared, unsure if anyone would answer, but the strength of the herd, led by Below, was a reminder of the power of unity. Moyo, still weak, slowly began to regain her balance. Her breathing had become steadier, and as the elephants carefully moved her toward a safer, more sheltered part of the savanna, she let out a low, appreciative grunt. Kibo could see the gratitude in her eyes, and he felt a deep sense of pride swelling in his chest. His idea to call for help had worked, and now his mother was on the road to recovery. Below, his tusks gleaming in the fading light of the sun, turned toward Kibo, his voice filled with approval. "You did well, young one," he said, his tone gentle but full of admiration. "Your call was strong, and it brought us here. You've learned well from your mother." Kibo's eyes widened with pride. He had never expected such praise from someone as wise and respected as Below. He had been afraid, unsure of what to do, but his quick thinking and his courage had saved the day. He turned to his mother, his heart still racing with emotion. Moyo, though still weak, nuzzled Kibo with her trunk. A soft, reassuring gesture. "I'm proud of you, Kibo," she said, her voice gentle. "You've done something very brave." Kibo felt a surge of happiness as he looked up at his mother. The worry that had consumed him for hours began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had done what was necessary, and the herd had responded without hesitation. The strength of their unity, their bond, was evident in every step they took together. The herd moved slowly, carefully, as they made their way toward a more sheltered area in the savanna. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft, golden light across the landscape. The air was cooler now, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees was a soothing balm after the frantic moments of earlier. Kibo walked beside his mother, his trunk brushing against hers, offering comfort and support as she regained her strength. As the herd settled into a safe area, with Moyo lying down once again, supported by the elephants around her, Kibo stepped back and took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the moment, the importance of what he had just accomplished, and he knew that he had done the right thing. The herd was a family, and they had come together to protect one of their own. Below, having ensured that Moyo was comfortable, approached Kibo once more. "You've shown great courage, young one," he said, his voice filled with respect. "The savanna is a harsh place, and the wild can be unforgiving. But with your quick thinking, you've proven that even the youngest among us can make a difference." Kibo's heart swelled with pride. He had never felt more certain of his place in the world. In that moment, surrounded by the strength and unity of the herd, Kibo knew that he had found his purpose. His mother had always taught him that the survival of the herd depended on each individual. And today, he had played a part in that survival. The knowledge that he had helped his mother, and that his actions had contributed to the safety of the herd, filled him with a sense of belonging that he had never known before. As the night settled over the savanna, and the stars began to twinkle in the vast, dark sky, Kibo lay beside Moyo, his trunk resting gently against her. He could hear the soft murmur of the herd around them, the comforting sounds of elephants settling down for the night. The world felt peaceful again. Kibo closed his eyes, his heart full of gratitude. He had learned a valuable lesson that day, the power of unity, the importance of quick thinking, and the strength that came from being part of something larger than himself. The savanna was a place of danger and uncertainty, but it was also a place of incredible beauty and connection. And as the stars shimmered above, Kibo knew that no matter what challenges the future might bring, he would always have the support of his herd. Together, they could face anything. As the days passed, the sun bathed the savanna in its warm, golden light, and Moyo's recovery began. The herd of elephants, led by Below, had offered their strength and support, carefully tending to Moyo and ensuring she regained her strength. Kibo, although young, had played an instrumental role in this. His quick thinking, his ability to stay calm under pressure, and his instinctive call for help had brought the herd together at a time when they needed it most. Moyo had always been the one to guide Kibo through the challenges of the wild, teaching him lessons on survival, wisdom, and the importance of unity. But now, in her time of need, Kibo had been the one to lead, proving that even the smallest and youngest members of the herd had the power to make a difference. Under the canopy of a large acacia tree, Kibo stood beside his mother as she rested. The sounds of the savanna surrounded them, the distant calls of birds and the rustling of the grass in the warm breeze. Moyo was lying on the ground, her breathing steady but still shallow, and she was surrounded by the other elephants of the herd. who were keeping watch over her. Kibo, filled with relief, stayed close to her, his small body resting against hers, offering the comfort and protection that he had once received from her. Moyo's eyes fluttered open, and she looked down at Kibo with a soft, proud smile. Her massive trunk reached out to gently touch his head, and she nuzzled him with a tenderness that spoke volumes. There was a sense of pride in her eyes, a deep, unspoken admiration for her son. "You did it, Kibo," Moyo said softly, her voice filled with love and respect. "You called for help when I couldn't. And you stayed calm when everything seemed impossible. You've made me proud." Kibo's heart swelled with warmth at her words. He had always admired his mother, learning from her strength, her wisdom, and her calm presence. But in this moment, Kibo realized something important. He had proven to himself that he, too, was capable of great things. He had been the one to call for help. And that call had saved Moyo's life. He had done something big. Something that had mattered, despite his small size. Moyo's trunk wrapped around Kibo in a comforting embrace. And she gently lifted his head with her trunk, meeting his gaze with a look of pride. "You are my pride, Kibo. You are my strength." Kibo blinked, feeling a surge of emotion in his chest. He had always known that Moyo was a force of nature, a strong protector who had taught him everything he knew about the wild. But now, as he looked up at her, he realized that he, too, had a place in the circle of life. He had a purpose, and he had the ability to protect the herd, just as she had always protected him. "I was scared, Mama," Kibo admitted, his voice soft. "I didn't know what to do at first. But when I remembered how the herd always calls to each other, I thought maybe I could try. I didn't want to lose you." Moyo's eyes softened as she looked down at her son, her trunk gently caressing his back. "You did the right thing, Kibo. In moments like this, it's not always strength that makes the difference, it's wisdom. And the courage to act. You showed both." Kibo thought about her words. He had always admired Moyo's strength, her power and grace, but now he realized that there was more to being strong than just physical power. The true strength lay in being calm and thinking clearly, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. It was about using your mind as well as your body. Moyo had always told him that the mind was just as important as physical strength. And now Kibo understood why. As Moyo continued to rest, Kibo stood up and looked around at the herd. The elephants were scattered across the savanna, some grazing, others resting, but all of them seemed to move with a sense of unity and purpose. The way they worked together, helping one another in times of need, was something Kibo had always admired. He had seen this bond before, in the way the herd cared for the young and protected the elderly. Now, he realized that the herd had just as much to teach him as Moyo had. Kibo moved away from his mother for a moment, walking toward the edge of the savanna where the tall grasses met the horizon. The air was cooler now, the heat of the day beginning to subside, and the sounds of the wild filled the air once again. Kibo stood quietly, his trunk raised, listening to the calls of distant animals and the soft murmur of the wind. He thought about the call he had made earlier, the sound that had echoed across the plains. It had been a simple act, but it had been enough to change everything. It had brought the herd to his mother's side, and it had saved her life. As he stood there, his thoughts turned inward. He had learned so much from Moyo: how to find food, how to navigate the savannah, how to stay close to the herd and protect one another. But today, he had learned something even more important. That courage was not just about physical strength. It was about using your mind, staying calm under pressure, and knowing when to act. It was about recognizing that every member of the herd, no matter how small, had something valuable to offer. Kibo turned back toward his mother, who was now sitting up with the help of the other elephants. She was still weak, but her strength was returning slowly, and Kibo could see that she was beginning to regain her energy. The herd was here, and everything was going to be okay. He walked back to Moyo's side, his heart filled with a quiet sense of pride. He had done something important, something that mattered, and as he stood beside her, he realized that he had become a part of the greater story of the wild, just as Moyo had always been. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the connections they made with each other, the bonds that tied him together, and the lessons they learned from one another. Moyo looked at Kibo with a soft smile. Her eyes filled with pride. "You are growing into a fine young elephant, Kibo. You are not just my son. You are a part of the herd's future. The courage and wisdom you showed today will carry you through many challenges ahead." Kibo felt a deep warmth in his chest. He had always looked up to his mother, but now, he saw himself in a new light. He wasn't just a calf anymore. He was a member of the herd. Someone who could make a difference. Someone who could protect and lead. As the evening began to fall, the herd gathered together under the shade of the trees. The warm, golden light of the setting sun bathed the savannah in its soft glow. And Kibo stood beside Moyo, his trunk resting gently against hers. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he had played a role in keeping their family safe. The lesson of the day was clear. Bravery was not always about fighting or overcoming physical obstacles. Sometimes, it was about staying calm, thinking clearly, and acting with wisdom in the face of uncertainty. Kibo had learned that lesson well, and as he looked at the herd around him, he understood that the true strength of an elephant lay not just in its size or power, but in its ability to stay united, to protect one another, and to always think of the future. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Kibo knew that he was ready for whatever came next. He had learned from the best, his mother, his herd, and the savannah itself, and with that knowledge, he felt ready to face whatever challenges the wild might throw his way. With courage, wisdom, and the strength of the herd behind him.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.